I'm Chico, and I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you about what our beloved Charles Darwin did about it. We love him for what he did, for finding out things that exist change over time. Things that are there are then selected, the ones that are more adapted, somehow they stay. And that's great. But one thing that Darwin admitted not knowing is how this variation gets there at first place. How you can get things to select. And this led to ideas like the gene pool, that nature has got all the possible genotypes and then it just picks the best one. But Darwin didn't know about genes. And you do. You know that you're made of genes, these genes can be on and off, and that it's good that they work this way. Because some ones, for example, genes that tell you to grow an arm to be active during a whole lifetime, you know? But you want some genes to be on, the housekeeping ones to make sure you close normally, and some other ones to be on and off at different parts of your day, of your year, of your life. And, well, you know you have a lot of genes as well. I study an organism that has fewer genes, still quite a lot. This is a fish in yeast, and these are its genes. Imagine all of these genes flicking on and off like a Christmas tree, like a constellation. This would be insane. Imagine all of them turning each other on and off, regulating each other's activation or repression. Some gene turns another one on, and then this information goes along, and then someone else is turned off, and it's a mess. It's chaos. Just try to imagine in how many ways these genes could be interacting. In fact, let's make a simple calculation. Let's say that each gene, gene 1, can either turn gene 2 on or off, or maybe do nothing to it. Let's make a simple table. Plus for an activation, minus for a repression, and 0 for 0, for nothing. If you consider all the ways they could be connected, you would have a 5,000 per 5,000 table, and for each cell, 3 possibilities, plus, minus, or 0. That would give you 3 times 3 times 3 for each cell. And for those who aren't that mathematically minded, this number is a lot. Literally. For to have an idea, the estimated number of atoms in the universe is 10 to the 80. This is 10 to the 11 million. There's literally no way in the history of the universe that nature could explore all of these combinations. There's no way. So it cannot simply sample the gene pool until it finds the best. No, there must be some clever way to get there, to get something that's relevant and not simply get lost, drowned in that pool. Today, Darwin would stop and think, how could nature find it? Seriously. And well, I don't study 5,000 genes, I study 10. 10, in fact, a simplification of those, a model made out of a model that simply represents a network in which the genes that control the yeast cell cycle, the ways it divides, those genes interact with themselves, and as you've understood, they turn themselves on and off, and etc. And well, in a certain moment in time, the state of this network will be represented by states of on and off, ones and zeros. And it works the following way. Each gene has got genes that are acting as its input. If there's too much repression, it turns off. If the majority is activating it, it turns on. If there's a balance, nothing happens. Okay, cool. That's what the equation down there says. And at a given moment in time, genes, well, those 10 genes, they can be on and off, and then in the next time step, they will turn themselves into a different pattern. You can represent that by a sequence, a string of ones and zeros. And then you can start mapping this, saying from a state of ups and downs, what's the next stage? Oh, I get to this one. You can maybe draw a bigger map with all of the possible combinations of ones and zeros. And if you draw the whole map, this is what you get. In this picture, every circle represents a state, a 1 and 0 sequence, and every arrow represents a transition from one state to another. And you see there's some funneling. Many states map into other ones, and you have this blue highway in which everything kind of maps down and down, representing here the cell cycle. These blue arrows are the ones that represent the transitions in the cell cycle from G1, G2, S, etc. And you see there's some funneling there. This is pretty cool, because if you have maybe some perturbation in the environment that will flick a gene that wasn't meant to be on and off, it will probably just fall back into the cell cycle. It's robust in this sense. We call this environmental robustness. And in fact, 75% of these states fall back into the cell cycle. So yeah, it's very robust. Wasn't expected, but fine. And bear with me, this is not the only way in which the cell cycle is robust. If you pick that network and start to apply mutations to it, say you change one of those pluses and minuses to something else, you add an interaction or you delete another one, you put an interaction where you didn't have one, what do you get? Well, for all the networks that are just one mutation away from the wild type, one step away from it, 35% of them still have that blue highway, that cell cycle. 35%. This is what we call mutational robustness. And I'll make a point for why this is really unexpected. Consider again all those 3 to the something networks. 3 to the n times n, in my case, and it's 10, not 5,000. Those are all the possible networks you have. All right. And how many sequences of those 9 steps do you have? That's the formula. K is 9 in this case. And so I decided to calculate the chance of finding a specific given sequence in any of those 3 to the 100 networks. The chance of finding it at least once would be less than 1,000,000th, and yet it's found more than 1,000,000 times. I only stopped at 1,000,000 because I stopped counting, but it's just too common. So yes, there is something going on there. This behavior, this cell cycle behavior, has got something that makes it special. And so far I haven't had to speak about fitness, it's just really common. Something's going on. Somehow it's easier to find. Maybe it was found because it's more common in this gene pool, I don't know. And well, in fact, these blue arrows, they were arbitrary. What if you look at the whole picture, this whole quiver, this set of arrows, and you want to see how much this whole picture will change if you have mutations to your network? I wanted to see how the phenotype itself, the whole thing will change. Well, what do you expect? Expect that the more mutations you have, the more changes you'll see in this picture, the less similar it would be. Yes, you do get that. But also, if you compare the yeast gene network, this one, to a randomly connected network with 10 nodes, they change much more. Somehow the yeast network is very robust in this sense as well. Environmentally robust and also mutationally. And not simply that highway, but the whole thing. And if you sample a lot of those random networks to compare it with the yeast, yes, using a proper measure for this robustness, this is what you get. That is the probability distribution for random networks, randomly connected ones, and the yeast is over here. It's just really, really unlikely. Nature wouldn't find it if it simply kept sampling. There, again, there's some way to find it. Well, I decided to visualize that 9-step transition in the following way. In this picture, each row would be a time step, each column a gene. And if you represent the cell cycle doing that, you will see that there is some directionality, some simplicity. Genes that turn themselves on in the beginning of the cell cycle won't do it in the end. Some genes belong to the beginning, some genes in the middle, some genes in the end. That is maybe not surprising. You want nature to behave some ways. Well, natural selection does its thing. But maybe being simple kind of helps, whereas a random output doesn't necessarily have that property. I decided to investigate that in cycles. If you look at that big picture full of arrows I showed you, and look at the end, see if the attractor in the end is a simple state, a resting state, or maybe a cycle. I decided to compare longer cycles with shorter ones. For my sample, this given cycle of 2 states, it was found 200,000 times in more. Whereas this other one, this specific other one, was found once for a 1,000,000-something network, sample networks. And if you simply look at these pictures, or these images really, one of them looks a lot like TV static, the other doesn't. If you try to compress it with something like the algorithm that WinZip uses, what's it going to do? It will generate the sets of instructions, the minimal set that you need to generate the image again. If you try to compress a text, it's easy to compress because it's essentially a bunch of 26 symbols. If you try to compress that image, it's quite easy to describe it. Do that, column. But if you try to compress a pixelated image, really, like TV static, it's really hard. It doesn't compress it that well. And the size of this compressed file is called the complexity, the Camargo of complexity. And then, I decided to look at the complexity of all the outputs, all the cyclic outputs that I measured. And I found something interesting. You find that the most common cycles, the ones that are easiest to be found, they're simple, often simple. And the rare ones are complex. And again, this doesn't say anything about fitness. It just says that they are easy to be found. So maybe that's how nature works. If you have this room full of dice on the floor, and I give you 10 seconds to give me the one with the biggest number, yes, you find a 6. But what if the dice are loaded? Then, well, you will probably find a 4 in this case. Not because it's the biggest number, but because it's so common. You maybe never find a 6. And that's how this bias will affect what you select. Maybe nature doesn't find the fittest ones, but simply the most common ones. Maybe that's how it could get so robust. Because it's simple, because it's common. So this robustness maybe comes from its lack of complexity. Or better said, it will find. That's what it gets. That's what it's got for the day. And that's all. I would like to thank my supervisor at the college, funding body, and Salvador Boquer for these lovely depictions of Darwin. Thank you very much.